We have a massive Minnesota Wild update as Jesper Wallstedt has finally spoken out about the season he had down in Iowa last year. We're going to be breaking it down, going over what he said and what this means going into next season, where he is set to back up for Filip Gustavsson, and also what this means for the future, as we have multiple quotes coming out from Michael Russo here in this video. Before we do jump into all of this news that we have here today, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to hit the sub button if you haven't already. We're on the road to 2K, and we're just over 100 subscribers away. Your support has been absolutely incredible as of late with all of this Minnesota Wild news, and this is not any sign of slowing down. We have so much more stuff to come out here in this offseason, as there are multiple moves still expected from this Minnesota Wild team. But before we do jump into this, like I said, your guys' support has been incredible. I appreciate everybody watching these videos right now. But let's jump into what we have here today from Jesper Wallstedt. He's spoken about what happened last year at Iowa. As you know, that was not the most ideal season for the netminder that is supposed to be the franchise goalie for years to come for this Minnesota Wild team. And I want to first pull up his quotes going over what he had to say. And this is what he said a couple days ago, going out about what happened last year. It was a very up and down, I'd say Wallstedt said. A tough start where things didn't go the way I had expected. It was difficult beginning in the AHL where I couldn't get a grip on things, and my confidence really took a hit. Once I started finding my rhythm and getting into it again, injuries started piling up and kept me off the ice. Instead, I just didn't feel like I could build any momentum. And it's very good to see Wallstedt come out and say this out in public. Obviously, we saw the struggles last year with his play to start off the season, and as he mentioned, his injuries going into the second half of the season. Nothing really seemed to be going Jesper Wallstedt's way in the NHL for his few games, or when he was down with Iowa in the AHL for the majority of the season, of course. And we see Wallstedt knowing that he's going to come into this next year as a player that is going to have a major boost and a lot of pressure on him as well. And seeing him come out and saying that, this was fully honest, the truth, this is what I dealt with, couldn't get a grip of things. The fact he's coming out with honesty here is very, very good to see, and a very good sign coming into next season for the netminder. And of course, we're going to see a big bounce-back season next year. There's no doubt about my mind about that as well. It is very tough kind of coming into a new system, of course, where he played in Sweden for his pretty much entire career, played on their national team at the World Juniors, now going into the North American game with Iowa. It was a major jump there, and one that is going to be, was going to be a challenge, and we saw it be a challenge, and he openly admitted that. Now, seeing Wallstedt come in here, and of course, look at the goaltending situation that we're seeing next year with Marc Andre Fleury retiring. He's having some big shoes to fill here with Marc Andre Fleury being one of the best goaltenders of all time, but also the backup to Filip Gustavsson, who had a phenomenal season here this year, while also making other moves. The Wild signed Kyle Peterson, Samuel Levi there as well, Riley Mercer. It looks like a little new goaltender situation here, but this is all looking towards Filip Gustavsson being the one, Jesper Wallstedt being the two, and ultimately seeing that come into a bit of a change in the next few years where Wallstedt is supposed to take over this team. Now, as well, looking into the way that we saw him play, his stats this year, his whole situation that he's gone through, as you see, the 27 games with Iowa this year definitely was one that we wanted to see a lot more. Going into last year with Iowa, 45 games, much better season there, a .910 save percentage, of 270 goals against, compared to this year, the three whatever goals against, and an 879 save percentage. I don't even want to look at that because we know that's not the Jesper Wallstedt we know and the Jesper Wallstedt we love. And it wasn't much better in the NHL for his 2 games there either. But what we're seeing the last few seasons with Jesper Wallstedt is the one that we're expecting to see come into the NHL. He's taking a much bigger role now. He's finally getting that opportunity to break into this lineup, break into the NHL at a regular pace, and that's something that we've really missed out on the past few seasons with Jesper Wallstedt, is that the goaltending has been very, very busy for the Wild, and having him break into here is finally getting the monkey off his back, I think is the best way of putting it into a perspective that, I still have to work for my position, but there's a lot less pressure on me now that I'm here, we're ready to go, and let's just get things going. I think that's the big thing that he has to really take into mind when he's coming into this. Now, Jesper Wallstedt's comments didn't stop there. He also had this to say: I definitely didn't think I handled it the right way. Looking back, I feel like I took it way too hard and maybe doubted myself too much. I thought it was my fault or something, but there was no way in the Wild could have carried 3 goalies all year. I almost laughed at myself for actually thinking even just a little that there could be space for 3 goalies with the cap, and that's what his mindset was, and he said about being in the AHL, not being that third goalie or even the backup in the NHL. Now, as you see, he laughed at himself because he knew the mindset that he had was not the right one at the time. Obviously, it's definitely a hard-hitting thing to say, you're going to be in the AHL for your 3rd year here. We know that you're going to be the future eventually, but when is that going to be? It's very tough to kind of think about that when you have Filip Gustavsson who's playing so well, Marc Andre Fleury, who was the end of his career there, and now seeing this happen here, I think that all of this pressure, all this stress that Jesper Wallstedt had this season is going to be gone next year. Obviously, there's still going to be some there. That's just your everyday nerves that you're going to get anyways, but the way that we've seen Wallstedt, and luckily how good we've seen him be the past few years, we're going to see that Wallstedt that we saw when we drafted him, the confidence there, and everything's going to be back for him here in this season. So I just can't wait for that, honestly. I'm one of the biggest Jesper Wallstedt fans of all time. So having this kind of finally see it come out the truth of what he's had to say, it's just super relieving to see what we're going to be next year, where he's going to be taking over quite a few games, I would say, for Marc Andre Fleury here. Now, of course, this is going to be a very interesting season when it does come down to it as well, because we know that the contracts for the goaltenders are not too long, and we do not really have anybody locked up just yet. And heading into the season, Filip Gustavsson is going to be in his last year. Jesper Wallstedt, of course, on that $2 million deal. This is one where we're going to see a lot of movement here in this season. We're going to see a lot of potential here from Jesper Wallstedt, Filip Gustavsson as well, who's on a contract year, and whatever's going to happen with him, I think it's going to be a very interesting contract. We expect that he's going to play well, and we know that he's going to be in a very much different situation. And when we do take a look at Filip Gustafsson's future contract and what an extension could look like for him, it really locks him up for multiple years at 6 years by $6.6 million. A fairly good contract for a goalie who is been one of the most consistent in the NHL last season, one of the best in the NHL last season, even through a very injured Minnesota team. And you take a look at that compared to someone like Ilya Sorokin or Ilya Samsonov, Igor Shesterkin, it really puts the cap into perspective that how good Gustafsson's been and how little that the projection is for him. And I think it causes a lot of interesting, ideas for Jesper Wallstedt, what's going to happen with him. It's supposed to be the future of this team, and if you do lock up Filip Gustavsson, you're not really going to have Wallstedt here as that goalie until he would be 27, 28. So I don't really want to think about this too early, but it's something to keep in mind when we head into this season, especially with Jesper Wallstedt being the future of this team that we know is going to be a big part of what is planned out for the Minnesota Wild here. But we do need to move on to our next little topic here, going over a very interesting quote from Michael Russo here, as him and Joe Smith had a Q&A on The Athletic, and this is what someone asked. Daniel Schauer, I believe his name. If you're watching this, let me know what your name is, the pronunciation is, but this is a very good question. Why trade Declan Chisholm? Sounds like they need a left shot defenseman, especially to start the season. Seems like they were heading towards an extension. Now, Michael Russo came out and said this here at the end of this part of The Athletic, saying, if the Wild feel the need to get a depth defenseman, I would go to the waiver route at the end of camp. There should be plenty available. Wouldn't it be ironic if they went after, let's just say, Damon Hunt, if the Wild if Damon Hunt don't make the Columbus roster? Now, kind of went over and said that Declan Chisholm was a player that didn't really get to the cap where the Wild were thinking he was going to be, and of course signed that $1.6 million deal with the Washington Capitals, and it is a little bit more than the Wild would have wanted to pay. So in that return, makes sense to get rid of the guy and ultimately, get him paid. Obviously, you want to see the guy. You don't want to hold him here for a little amount of money. But when it does come down to the Wild defense, we're looking at a pretty good spot here, of course. You're taking a look at the left side. Jacob Middleton, Zeke William, David Jiricek. Two very young defensemen there with Jacob Middleton and Faber, Spurgeon, and Bogosian on the right side. Of course, we're missing out one big name here in Jonas Brodin as well. So there are lots of opportunities here for some defense on the Wild and what's going to happen. There's multiple moves that are still going to be made, but this is just another thing to point out the truth behind the Declan Chisholm trade. So let me know what you think about all this news here, especially the Jesper Wallstedt stuff that we had at the beginning, because I think there's a lot of options that the Wild are going to have with their goaltending here in this year. But it's all I got in this video. If you enjoyed, give it a like, hit the sub button as well. Remember, we're on the road to 2K, and we're so close to hitting that mark. So if you haven't already, be sure to hit that sub button for all of your Wild news. But that's all I got. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.